We'd like to help ease your burden. Accidents happen. Let's not make this messier than it needs to be.
Richard Kane said, sliding an envelope across the polished table like he was doing me some grand favor. $500,000. Cash. To forget my son burned to death in a motel room. I looked at that envelope, thick, obscene, and something inside me went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that comes right before you do something you can't take back. You want to know what I did? I smiled, took what he offered, not the money, but the fight itself. And 6 months later, I trapped that smug bastard in my son's columbarium with cameras rolling and police lights blazing while he lunged at me like the cornered animal he was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a 67-year-old deli owner became the woman who took down a pharmaceutical executive and made him beg on live television. It started with a phone call, 3 a.m. You know that sound, the one that jolts you awake and floods your chest with ice-cold dread before you even reach for the phone. My hand fumbled across the nightstand, knocked over my reading glasses, finally grabbed the receiver. Mom? Sam's voice, but wrong somehow. Tight, shaking just enough that only a mother would catch it. Honey, what's wrong? Mom, did you eat today? That question. The same one I'd asked him every single night when he was working late at that godforsaken company. Now he was asking me, at 3 a.m, and his voice cracked on the word, eat, like he was holding back tears or terror or both. Sam, what's happening? Where are you? Static a breath, then, Mom, The line went dead. I sat there in my dark bedroom, phone pressed against my ear so hard it hurt, listening to nothing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I called back, straight to voicemail. Again, 5 times, nothing. The smell of panic is metallic, did you know that? Like sucking on pennies. I threw on my robe and paced my tiny living room, wearing a path in the carpet between the couch and the window. Outside, Clearwater slept. Palm trees swayed in the Gulf breeze. Streetlights cast orange pools on empty sidewalks. Everything peaceful, everything wrong. I made coffee I couldn't drink, watched the clock. 3:30, 4:15. At 5:43, knuckles rapped on my door, sharp, official. 2 officers stood on my porch, hats in hands, faces arranged in that expression they must teach at the academy, the one that says, "Your life just ended, ma'am, and we're very sorry about it." Mrs. Margaret Hanley? Yes. My voice came out steady. Strange how shock does that. Freezes you solid while everything inside shatters. Ma'am, there's been an incident. Your son, Samuel Hanley. There was a fire at the Seaside Rest Motel. We're very sorry, but he didn't make it. Electrical fault, they said. Tragic accident. Smoke inhalation. Quick, they promised, like that was supposed to comfort me. They handed me a card with a case number. Said someone would be in touch about arrangements. I stood in my doorway and watched them walk away, their words still hanging in the air like smoke. Electrical fault. Accident. I thought about that phone call, my son's trembling voice asking if I'd eaten, the way the line cut off mid-sentence, and I knew, the way every mother knows when someone's lying about her child, that nothing about this was an accident. The morgue smelled like bleach trying to hide something it couldn't quite reach. Antiseptic and decay. They asked me to identify him, but there wasn't much left to identify. Just burns and silence where my boy used to be. I signed papers. So many papers. My hand moved across forms I didn't read, a stranger's signature appearing under my name. The funeral director spoke in hushed, practiced tones about options and packages. I picked the cheapest cremation. Not because of money, because I couldn't bear the thought of putting what remained of Sam into the ground. Emily, my daughter-in-law, wasn't there to help me decide. She was 3 floors up in the ICU, tubes snaking from her arms, machines breathing for her. Car accident, they said. Same night Sam died. Her sedan wrapped around a telephone pole on Route 19. No skid marks, no explanation. 2 tragedies in one night. What are the odds? I sat beside Emily's bed that first week, holding her cold hand, listening to the rhythmic hiss and beep of machines keeping her alive. The nurses were kind. They brought me terrible coffee and pretended not to notice when I cried. "Mrs. Hanley, you should go home." Rest this from a young nurse with tired eyes and a name tag that read Jennifer. "I can't," I told her, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Everyone I love is either dead or dying. Where exactly would I go?" She squeezed my shoulder and left me alone. The house felt haunted when I finally returned. Sam's childhood drawings still magneted to my refrigerator, yellowed and curling at the edges. His coffee mug, the one that said, "World's okayest son," still sat in my dish rack where he'd left it 3 weeks ago after Sunday breakfast. I picked it up, ran my thumb over the chipped rim, put it back down like it might shatter. I didn't sleep. I moved through rooms like a ghost haunting my own life, picking up objects and setting them down, forgetting why I'd entered each space. The deli stayed closed. I couldn't imagine smiling at customers, slicing pastrami, pretending life was still normal and good. On the 4th day, Detective Lewis came by. Big man, soft handshake, eyes that looked everywhere except at me. "Just routine follow-up, ma'am," he said, settling his bulk onto my couch without being invited. "About your son's death." "Have you found something?" I leaned forward, desperate, pathetic. Was it really an accident? He flipped through a small notebook, making a show of reviewing details he'd clearly already memorized. Electrical short in the motel's wiring. Old building. Happens more than you'd think. The owner's already facing citations. But Sam called me. My voice cracked. Right before. He sounded scared. Lewis looked up, and I saw something flicker across his face. Annoyance? Impatience? He smoothed it away quickly. "Grief does funny things to memory, Mrs. Hanley. Makes us see patterns that aren't there." I know what I heard. "I'm sure you do, ma'am." Patronizing now, like I was a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own memories. But the fire marshal's report is clear. Accidental electrical fire, no signs of foul play, case closed, just like that. My son reduced to a file folder and a stamp. "What about Emily?" I pressed. "Her accident the same night? You don't find that suspicious?" He stood, tucking the notebook away. "Sometimes bad luck clusters, ma'am." "I'm real sorry for your losses, but there's nothing criminal here, just tragedy." He showed himself out. I watched through the window as he climbed into his car, sat there for a moment doing something on his phone, then drove away. Something about the set of his shoulders, the speed with which he'd dismissed my questions. It felt wrong, rehearsed. That same afternoon, I got a call from LifeMen Therapeutics. Sam's employer, a woman with a voice like honey and razor blades, asked if I could come in to discuss Samuel's final affairs. I agreed because what else was I going to do? The building was all glass and steel, reflecting the Florida sun until it hurt to look at directly. Inside, everything was white and chrome and expensive. A receptionist led me to a conference room where Richard Kane waited, Vice President of Operations. That's what his business card said when he slid it across the polished table. He wore a suit that cost more than 3 months of my mortgage. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Hanley, first let me express our deepest condolences. Smooth as silk, empty as air. Sam was valued here. His loss is felt by everyone." I nodded, waiting. "Now there are some delicate matters." He folded his hands like a man in prayer. "Sam was working on sensitive projects, proprietary information. Before we can release his personal effects, we need assurance that—" "I don't care about his work files," I interrupted. "I just want his things." Of course. That smile again. "But there's also the matter of liability. The motel fire, your daughter-in-law's accident. These situations can lead to complications, legal expenses." He let that hang in the air between us. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, set it on the table between us, thick, bulging. "We'd like to help ease your burden," Kane said softly, almost tenderly. This is $500,000, Mrs. Hanley, to help with medical bills, funeral costs, whatever you need. All we ask is that you sign a simple agreement. No lawsuits, no public statements, just closure. I stared at that envelope. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. $500,000 to shut up and go away, to stop asking questions about why my son died screaming into a phone at 3 a.m. My hands shook as I reached for it. Kane's smile widened. Then I stood up. "Mr. Kane," I said, my voice steady and cold as January, "you can take your blood money and choke on it." I walked out of that building with nothing but rage and the absolute certainty that my son had been murdered, and as I drove home through the palm tree-lined streets of Clearwater, I made myself a promise. If the law wouldn't fight for Sam, then I would become something the law couldn't stop. The Seaside Rest Motel sat on a strip of cracked asphalt 2 miles from the highway, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Yellow caution tape still crisscrossed the second floor where Sam had died. The manager, a woman with bottle blonde hair and suspicious eyes, told me the room was sealed pending investigation. "Investigation's closed," I said flatly, standing in her cluttered office that reeked of cigarettes and air freshener fighting a losing battle. "Detective Lewis told me himself." She shrugged, filing her nails. "Still can't let you up there. Insurance, I left. But I didn't leave the parking lot. I sat in my car, my ancient Honda with the passenger seat still adjusted for Sam's long legs, and I watched the comings and goings, watched the woman chain smoke on the office steps, watched until the sun began its slow descent toward the Gulf, painting everything orange and gold. That's when I noticed the print shop across the street. Small place, hand-painted sign reading Kohl's Quick Print, and mounted above its door, a security camera pointing directly at the motel. My heart kicked against my ribs. I got out of the car. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. The shop smelled like ink and paper and possibility. Behind the counter stood a man in his 70s, barrel-chested, with forearms like tree trunks and eyes that had seen things. "Help you, ma'am?" His voice was gravel and warmth. "I hope so." I approached the counter, suddenly uncertain. "My name is Margaret Hanley. My son died in that motel fire last week." Something shifted in his expression, softened. "I heard about that. I'm real sorry." "Thank you. I'm Ethan Cole, by the way." He extended a massive hand. His grip was gentle despite its size. "Retired firefighter. Ran Station 7 for 23 years before my knees gave out." A firefighter, of course. I could see it in the way he stood, the alert awareness in his eyes, even in this quiet shop. "Mr. Cole?" Ethan. I took a breath. "That camera above your door, does it record?" He studied me for a long moment. I could see him measuring something, deciding. Finally, he nodded slowly. "It does. 30-day loop before it records over itself." "The night of the fire. Do you still have that footage?" His jaw tightened. "I do. Gave a copy to the police already." "And what did they do with it?" "Not a damn thing, far as I can tell." Bitterness crept into his voice. "Case closed," they said. "Nothing suspicious. But I've seen enough fires to know when something stinks." My breath caught. "You saw something on the footage." Ethan walked to the door, flipped the sign to closed, and locked it. Then he gestured for me to follow him to a cramped back office that smelled like coffee and old paper. A computer sat on a desk buried under invoices and sample prints. He woke it up, clicked through folders. "This stays between us," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of secrets that could cost something. "I got a granddaughter in college. I can't afford trouble." "I understand." He pulled up the footage. Grainy, black and white timestamp reading 2:47 a.m. The motel sat quiet across the street. I watched the minutes tick by, my pulse hammering in my throat. At 2:51, a dark sedan pulled into the lot. A figure emerged, man-shaped, wearing a black cap pulled low, face angled away from cameras. He moved with purpose, no hesitation. Up the exterior stairs to the second floor, disappeared into a room, Sam's room. "Keep watching," Ethan murmured. At 2:59, the figure reappeared, walking quickly now, carrying something bulky under one arm. He climbed into the sedan. At 3:03, orange light bloomed in the second-floor window. By 3:04, smoke poured from under the door. The man sat in his car and watched, just watched, for 2 full minutes while my son burned. Then he drove away. My hands had fisted so tight my nails drew blood from my palms. Did the police see this? This exact footage? Every frame. And they still called it an accident. Yes, ma'am. They did. The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Someone had walked into my son's room, started that fire, and walked away. And the police had seen proof and buried it. Can you copy this for me? My voice came out steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Ethan hesitated. If anyone finds out, no one will know it came from you. I swear it. He studied me again with those firefighter's eyes that had seen people at their worst and best. Whatever he saw in my face convinced him. He plugged in a USB drive and copied the file. Handed it to me like he was passing contraband. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked. "Whatever I have to." I drove straight to the hospital, tucked the USB into the narrow locker beside Emily's bed, beneath her purse and the sweater I'd brought from home. No one would look there. It would be safe until I figured out what to do next. Emily lay still as death, machines keeping rhythm with a life that hung by threads. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "I found proof," I whispered to her. "Someone killed him. Someone killed Sam, and the police are covering it up." The machines beeped their steady response. I kissed her forehead and turned to leave. That's when I noticed the black sedan in the parking lot below. Same make, same model. Idling near the exit with its lights off, watching, my blood turned to ice water. I stepped back from the window, heart hammering. How long had they been following me? Since the motel? Since Ethan's shop? I took the stairs instead of the elevator, keeping to the shadows, exited through the emergency room side entrance, walked to my car with my keys threaded between my knuckles, like brass knuckles, scanning for threats. The sedan pulled out behind me as I left the parking lot. I drove home through Clearwater's quiet evening streets, that dark shape maintaining distance but never disappearing. They wanted me to know, wanted me scared, wanted me to understand that whatever I'd found, they knew about it. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sedan rolled past slowly. I caught a glimpse through the tinted window, a man in a black cap, face hidden in shadow. The same man from the video. I locked every door, closed every curtain, sat in my dark kitchen with a knife from the butcher block, listening to my house creak and settle, wondering if that creak was just wood expanding or someone testing my locks. But here's what they didn't understand. Here's what Richard Kane and his hired muscle and that corrupt detective didn't know about 67-year-old deli owners who've buried husbands and raised sons alone. You don't scare us by showing us death. We've already stared it down. We've already lost everything that matters. You just make us angry. And anger, real anger. The kind that's been simmering for decades under polite smiles and, yes, deers. That's more dangerous than any weapon they could buy. I set the knife on the table and opened Sam's last notebook, the one they'd returned with his scorched belongings. Flipped through pages of formulas and notes I couldn't understand. And there, on the final page, written in his careful engineer's handwriting, "If something happens to me, tell Mom. Grandpa knows everything, Grandpa." My husband had been dead for 15 years. Sam had no living grandfather. What the hell did that mean? I spent 2 days turning that message over in my mind like a stone, looking for hidden facets. Grandpa knows everything. Sam's grandfather, my late husband Robert, had been gone since 2010. Heart attack while raking leaves in our backyard. I'd scattered his ashes in the Gulf myself. So what was Sam trying to tell me? I went through everything. The box of Sam's belongings the police had returned, mostly ash and melted plastic. His apartment, which smelled like him still, like coffee and the sandalwood soap he used. I touched his clothes hanging in the closet, pressed my face into his shirts, and cried until I had nothing left. Nothing, no answers. Just the hollowness of spaces he'd never fill again. On the third morning, my phone rang. The hospital. My heart seized. "Mrs. Hanley?" The nurse's voice trembled with something that might have been excitement. "It's Emily. She's awake. I drove 90 in a 65 zone, didn't care. Burst into the ICU with my heart hammering so hard, I thought it might crack my ribs." Emily lay propped against pillows, tubes removed, her face pale as new snow, but her eyes, oh God, her eyes were open, seeing, alive. "Maggie," she whispered, her voice raw from weeks of intubation. I collapsed into the chair beside her bed and grabbed her hand. It was warm, warm and squeezing back. "I thought I'd lost you too," I choked out. "I thought they'd taken both of you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Sam?" I shook my head, unable to speak. She understood, the grief that washed over her face. I saw it break her, saw the moment she realized her husband was gone and she'd missed even saying goodbye. We cried together, two women who'd lost the same man in different ways, holding on to each other like drowning people clutching driftwood. When we could breathe again, when the nurses had checked her vitals and left us alone, Emily gripped my hand with surprising strength. "It wasn't an accident," she said hoarsely, each word seeming to cost her. "My crash. Someone ran me off the road." "I know." I leaned closer. "Emily, Sam called me the night he died. He was terrified, and I found security footage. Someone went into his room and started that fire." Her eyes widened. "Richard Kane. You know about him?" Sam was going to blow the whistle. She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing. The cardiac stent LifeMend was rushing to market. It was failing. Patients were dying and the company buried the data. Sam found proof. He was going to the FDA. Everything clicked into place. The fear in Sam's voice. Kane's blood money. The police cover-up. They'd killed my son to protect their profits. "There's something else," I said. Sam left a note. In his notebook. It said if anything happened to him, I should know that Grandpa knows everything. "Do you have any idea what that means?" Emily's brow furrowed. She closed her eyes, clearly exhausted. "Grandpa." He said that word. Right before... Her eyes snapped open. "When they ran me off the road." I was on the phone with Sam. The last thing he said was, "Tell Mom, Grandpa." And then I heard the crash and the line went dead. My pulse thundered in my ears. He was trying to tell you something about Grandpa. Something important enough to be his last words. "But your husband died years ago." "I know." I stood, pacing the small room. It has to mean something else. A code, a place, And then it hit me, not a person, an object. "His fountain pen," I breathed. Emily stared at me. "What?" "Robert's fountain pen, the one I gave Sam when he graduated college. He carried it everywhere, said it made him feel like his dad was still watching over him." I turned to her, excitement and dread mixing in my stomach. "It was in the box. The box of his things from the fire." "You still have it?" "At home. In my closet. I couldn't look at it." I kissed her forehead. "Rest. I'll be back." I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. Pulled into my driveway scanning for black sedans. None today, and practically ran inside. The box sat on my closet shelf where I'd shoved it, unable to face the remains of my son's life. I pulled it down. Soot stained my hands as I sorted through melted wallet, warped keys, a watch face without hands. And there, at the bottom, heavy, tarnished but intact, Robert's fountain pen. It was a Waterman, solid brass, the kind they don't make anymore. Robert had bought it in 1982 to sign our mortgage papers. Said a man should sign important documents with authority. After he died, it became my most precious possession. Giving it to Sam had felt like passing on a piece of his father's strength. I held it up to the light. The brass was scorched black in places, but the pen itself was whole. Surprisingly whole for something that had survived that fire. Too whole. My heart began to race. I unscrewed the barrel from the nib. The ink cartridge fell out dried and useless. But the barrel felt wrong, too heavy. I squinted inside, tilted it toward the lamp. Something rattled. With trembling fingers, I found a tiny seam near the base. Pressed, twisted, a false bottom popped free, and into my palm fell a micro SD card no bigger than my thumbnail. I stared at it, this impossibly small thing. This was Grandpa. This was what my son had died protecting. I grabbed my laptop, ancient, slow, but it had a card reader, slid the card in, waited an eternity while the computer wheezed and processed. A folder appeared. Life Men Truth. Inside, spreadsheets, medical reports, audio files, hundreds of documents. I clicked on the first spreadsheet. Patient names, serial numbers for cardiac stents, columns marked adverse event, hospitalization, death, row after row after row of deaths, and at the bottom, a separate file, Kane_accounts.pdf. I opened it. Bank statements, offshore accounts in the Caymans, wire transfers from shell companies, millions of dollars, and every transaction tied back to Richard Kane. He'd been paid to bury the deaths, paid to let patients die while life men rushed their defective product to market. My son had found proof of mass murder, and they'd killed him for it. I sat in my dark living room, the laptop screen casting blue light across my face, and felt something shift inside me. The last piece of ordinary Margaret Hanley, the woman who smiled at customers and made small talk about the weather. She died in that moment. What replaced her was harder, sharper, capable of things I'd never imagined. I copied the files to 3 separate USB drives, hid one in my freezer behind the frozen peas, one in the deli, taped behind the ancient cash register. The third I sealed in a plastic bag and buried in my backyard under the rosemary plant. Then I sat down and made a list of everyone who needed to pay. Richard Kane, Detective Lewis, the CEO of LifeMend. Everyone who'd chosen profit over human life. Everyone who'd looked at my son and decided he was expendable. I was going to destroy them. Every single one. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed help. I needed someone who could take this evidence and turn it into something the world couldn't ignore. I needed the press. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop again and started searching. PBS had an investigative unit that did long-form exposés. I found their tip line, started typing. My name is Margaret Hanley. My son was murdered by LifeMen Therapeutics to cover up medical device deaths. I have proof, financial records, patient data, everything. I paused, fingers hovering over the keys. Once I sent this, there was no going back. They'd come for me harder. The black sedans would become something worse. I thought about Sam's last phone call, his trembling voice asking if I'd eaten. I hit send. 3 days later, a woman called, professional, careful. Mrs. Hanley? This is Claire Rivera from PBS. I'd like to talk about your tip. We met at a coffee shop in Clearwater Beach, far from my house, and the cameras I now assumed were everywhere. Claire was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and a recorder she placed on the table between us. Before we begin, she said gently, I need you to understand the risk. If what you're alleging is true, these people are dangerous. Going public could... They already killed my son. I interrupted, my voice flat and certain. What else can they take from me? She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Tell me everything. I did. 2 hours of testimony. The fire, the video, Emily's crash, the SD card, Kane's blood money. She listened without interrupting, taking notes, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, she sat back. Mrs. Hanley, if we can verify even half of this, it's the biggest medical scandal in a decade. Can you verify it? I'll need the files. And I'll need time to build the story, at least a month, maybe 2. Fine. But I want something in return. What? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to something cold and purposeful. When this breaks, I want to be there. I want Kane to see my face when his world ends. Claire's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Mrs. Hanley, I think we're going to work very well together. I left that coffee shop with a partner in vengeance and returned home to find an envelope wedged in my door. No stamp, no return address. Just my name written in blocky capitals. Inside, a single photograph, me and Claire, at the coffee shop taken through the window, and written across the bottom in red marker, "Back off." I stared at that photograph for a long time. Me and Claire, frozen mid-conversation, unaware we were being watched. The red marker bleeding across our faces like a threat written in blood. They wanted me afraid, wanted me to crawl back into my grief and stay there, silent and broken. Instead, I taped the photo to my refrigerator, right next to Sam's childhood drawings, a reminder of exactly who I was fighting. You know what fear does when you've already lost everything? It transforms, becomes something else entirely, becomes fuel. I called Claire. They know about our meeting. I saw. Her voice was tight. I got the same photo at my office. We should stop. This is too dangerous. No. Mrs. Hanley, no. I repeated harder this time. They think a photograph scares me. They don't understand. I'm 67 years old. I buried my husband. I just cremated my son. What exactly do they think they can take from me that hasn't already been ripped away? Silence on the line. Then, what do you want to do? I want to make them think they've won. And then I want to destroy them. We met again, this time at Emily's hospital room. She was stronger now, sitting up, color returning to her cheeks. Claire set up her recorder while Emily and I sat on either side of the bed like co-conspirators planning a heist, which, in a way, we were. Here's what we know, Claire said, clicking through files on her laptop. I verified the patient data. Cross-referenced deaths with serial numbers. It's real, all of it. At least 37 people died from stent failures that LifeMen knew about and concealed. 37. I felt sick. 37 families destroyed so Richard Kane could buy another yacht. The financial records check out too, Claire continued. Kane's been siphoning money through shell companies. We're talking about systematic fraud, medical negligence, murder for profit. How long until you can publish? I asked. 2 weeks if we push. But Mrs. Hanley, the moment this story breaks, Kane will know exactly where it came from. You'll be exposed. Good. I smiled, and Emily reached over to squeeze my hand. I want him to know it was me. There's one problem, Claire said carefully. We need Kane on record. A response to the allegations, standard journalism. But the second we contact LifeMend, they'll lawyer up and we'll never get near him. I leaned back, thinking. The photograph on my fridge, the black sedan that followed me everywhere now, barely pretending to hide. They were watching, waiting for me to make a mistake, so I'd give them one. What if he came to me? I said slowly. Emily and Claire both looked at me. What if I contacted him directly? Offered to sell him the evidence? That's insane, Emily breathed. Maggie, he'll kill you. Maybe. Or maybe his ego won't let him resist. He thinks I'm just a grieving old woman. Stupid, desperate, easy to manipulate. I met Claire's eyes. If he agrees to meet, will you be able to record it? We can wire you, she said carefully. Audio and video, but Emily's right. This is incredibly dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. I stood, pacing the small room. They've already threatened me. Already followed me? The only question is whether I die having done nothing or die having dragged that bastard into the light with me. Don't talk like that, Emily said fiercely, tears in her eyes. Don't you dare. I knelt beside her bed, took both her hands. Sweetheart, Sam died trying to expose the truth. If I don't finish what he started, then what was it all for? He can't have died for nothing. I won't let him. She pulled me into a fierce hug, this woman who'd married my son and become my daughter in all the ways that mattered. Then we do it smart, she whispered against my shoulder. We do it so you survive to see him burn. Over the next week, we planned. Claire worked with her technical team to create a wire thin enough to hide under my clothes. We practiced the meeting, what I'd say, how I'd position myself for the hidden camera, exit strategies if things went wrong, and I created the bait. I bought a new USB drive, filled it with corrupted files and dummy data that looked real enough to pass a quick inspection. Then I called LifeMen Therapeutics and asked for Richard Kane. His secretary put me through immediately. He'd been expecting my call. Mrs. Hanley. That smooth voice, oozing false sympathy. I was sorry to hear you rejected our offer of assistance. Have you reconsidered? I have something you want, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my hammering heart. The files Sam was going to take to the FDA, everything. Patient data, financial records, all of it. Sharp intake of breath. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. My son hid it before he died. Took me a while to find it, but I have it now. I paused, let him sweat. And I'm willing to sell it to you. Mrs. Hanley, if you're suggesting... $500,000, I interrupted. Same amount you offered before, but this time I'm buying your silence with it instead of you buying mine. Silence stretched. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing options. Finally, how do I know you actually have anything? I'll send you a sample, one file, enough to prove I'm not bluffing. You verify it's real, then we meet. Public place. You bring cash, I bring the drive. Simple transaction, another pause. Where would we meet? Sam's columbarium at Clearwater Memorial Gardens, tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. I chose the location deliberately, sacred ground, a place where Sam's ashes rested, where I could look this man in the eye and make him pay for what he'd taken. That's quite dramatic, Kane said dryly. My son's ashes are there, Mr. Kane. Seems appropriate. Unless you're afraid? He laughed, cold and sharp. Fine. Tomorrow, 9. Come alone, Mrs. Hanley. If I see anyone else, any hint of police or press, the deal is off. Same to you. Just you and the money, nothing else. One question, he said, voice dropping. How do I know you haven't made copies? You don't. But what choice do you have? I could have already gone to the police, gone to the press. Instead, I'm giving you a chance to make this disappear. That should tell you something about how much I just want this nightmare to end. I hung up before he could respond. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down. Emily, who'd been listening on speaker, grabbed my shoulders. You were perfect, she said urgently. He believed you. He believed I'm weak, I corrected. He believed I'm exactly what he thinks I am, a scared old woman who can be bought. Good, Claire said from the doorway. She'd been recording everything. Let him believe it right up until the moment we destroy him. That night, I sent Kane a single file from Sam's evidence, one spreadsheet showing 10 patient deaths, enough to prove I had the real data. Within an hour, he texted confirmation for tomorrow night. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sam, about how he'd called me that last time, voice shaking, asking if I'd eaten, making sure I was okay even as his own world was burning down. I'm going to finish this, I whispered to the darkness. I promise, baby, Mom's gonna finish it. The next day crawled by. Claire's team fitted me with the wire, a tiny microphone and camera sewn into a button on my cardigan, tested it a dozen times, walked me through the plan again and again. We'll be nearby, Claire promised. 2 blocks away in a van, the moment you signal us, we come in. And the police? I contacted someone I trust. Detective Maria Santos, county level. She's clean and she's agreed to be standing by, but she won't move until we have Kane on tape admitting to something actionable. Emily held my face between her hands. You don't have to do this. We can still find another way. There is no other way. I kissed her forehead. This ends tonight. At 8:30, I drove to Clearwater Memorial Gardens. The columbarium stood at the edge of the property, a curved wall of marble niches where ashes rested in bronze urns. Sam's was third from the left, second row. Fresh flowers, chrysanthemums that Emily and I had brought yesterday, sat in the built-in vase. I touched his name, engraved in the marble. Samuel Robert Hanley, beloved son and husband, seeker of truth. "I'm here, Sam," I whispered. "Watch over me, okay?" The garden was quiet. Security lights cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. A fountain burbled somewhere nearby. Peaceful, beautiful, the kind of place that should have been reserved for gentle endings, not violent confrontations. At 9 exactly, headlights swept across the entrance. A black Mercedes, not the sedan that had been following me. Something nicer, more expensive. Richard Kane emerged wearing a suit even at this hour. He carried a black leather bag and walked toward me with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled everything. He stopped 10 feet away, eyes scanning the area for threats he wouldn't find. Claire's van was parked on the street beyond the gates, invisible in the darkness. "Mrs. Hanley," he said smoothly, "I must admit I'm impressed you found the files." Sam was smart. He taught me to be smart too. Kane smiled that empty smile. "Then let's not waste time." "You have the drive." I pulled the USB from my pocket, held it up so the camera in my button could capture everything. "Right here, complete patient data, complete financial records, everything that proves Lifemen knowingly killed 37 people. His face twitched, just slightly, but I saw it, the mask slipping. "Those are serious allegations," he said carefully. "They're facts, Mr. Kane. My son died because he found the truth. My daughter-in-law was nearly killed. You offered me money to stay quiet. Why would you do that if there was nothing to hide?" "I offered you compassion," he corrected, but his voice had changed. Harder now. "Grief does strange things to people, makes them see conspiracies where there are only tragedies." "Is that what you'll say in court?" I took a step closer. That 37 dead patients are just tragedy? That Sam burning to death was just bad luck? "Your son," Kane said slowly, dangerously, "made a mistake. He stole proprietary data, threatened to damage a company worth billions based on incomplete information he didn't understand. I gave him a chance to walk away. He refused. So you killed him. I protected my company." The words hung in the air between us. Confession, clear as day. I felt the wire recording against my skin and saw Kane's face shift as he realized what he'd just admitted. "You're wearing a wire," he said flatly. "Yes," I smiled. "I am." His hand moved toward his jacket, and I knew with absolute certainty that he had a gun and I was about to die, but I was ready. Time slowed. Kane's hand disappeared inside his jacket, and I saw my death coming. Saw it as clearly as I'd seen Sam's name on that marble wall behind me. But I didn't run. "You should know something," I said, my voice carrying across the quiet garden with surprising steadiness. "That wire isn't just recording, it's broadcasting, live." To PBS. Kane froze, hands still hidden in his jacket. "Right now," I continued, taking one deliberate step toward him. "Thousands of people are watching you admit to murdering my son, watching you threaten a 67-year-old woman at her son's grave. So go ahead, Mr. Kane. Pull out whatever you've got in that jacket. Give them something really good to watch." His face drained of color. For the first time since I'd met him, Richard Kane looked afraid. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice cracked on the word. "Am I?" I gestured toward the columbarium wall. "See that flower arrangement? The big chrysanthemums? There's a camera hidden in the center. And that fountain over there? Another one in the stonework. Claire Rivera has 3 different angles of your face right now." It was true. We'd planted the cameras yesterday while Kane's surveillance team had been busy following me to the grocery store. A diversion within a diversion. "The moment you showed up," I said softly, viciously, "this stopped being a meeting. It became a broadcast, and everything you've said, every word about protecting your company, about giving Sam a chance, it's all being recorded for the world to see." Kane's hand emerged from his jacket empty. His face twisted with rage and something else, panic, pure animal panic. "You stupid woman." he hissed, abandoning all pretense of civility. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I have lawyers. I have friends in law enforcement. I'll bury you." "You already tried that." I held up the fake USB drive. "This isn't even real, by the way." "It's dummy data. The actual evidence went to the FBI 3 days ago. Certified mail, return receipt requested. They've had it since Tuesday." The lie came out smooth as silk. In truth, Claire and I were still verifying files, still building the case. But Kane didn't know that. And the beautiful thing about cornered predators is they stop thinking clearly. "The FBI," he repeated slowly, his face going from white to red. "You sent it to the FBI. Every file, every patient death, every offshore bank account." I smiled. "You're not buying silence tonight, Mr. Kane. You're providing evidence of your own guilt, on camera. Thank you, by the way. This will make incredible television." He lunged. I'd expected it, planned for it even, but the violence of it still shocked me. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next his hands were around my throat, squeezing, his face contorted with murderous rage. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. His thumbs pressed into my windpipe and the world started to go gray at the edges. This is it, I thought distantly. This is how I die. Then, floodlights. Brilliant. Blinding, explosion of white light from 3 directions that turned the dark cemetery into a stage. Kane released me and I collapsed, gasping, clutching my throat. Through watering eyes, I saw them coming. Claire and her camera crew bursting through the garden gate, Detective Santos and 4 uniformed officers pouring in from the side entrance, all of them converging on Kane with weapons drawn and cameras rolling. "Richard Kane, you're under arrest for assault," Santos barked, professional and cold. "Get on the ground." Now. Kane stood frozen, illuminated like an actor in a spotlight, realizing too late that he'd walked into a trap with an audience of thousands watching live. "This is entrapment," he sputtered, but he was already being forced to his knees. "This is illegal." "What's illegal," Santos said as she cuffed him, "is attempted murder. We have you on video assaulting Mrs. Hanley. We have audio of you admitting to corporate murder. And thanks to this nice USB drive she's been waving around, we have probable cause to search every file in your company." She didn't know the USB was fake. Beautiful. Kane's eyes found mine as they hauled him to his feet. Pure hatred burned there. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You have no idea the people I know, the power I have." I stood on shaking legs, my throat already bruising, and walked closer until I was inches from his face. "You killed my son," I said quietly, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You murdered him because he tried to save lives you destroyed for profit. I don't care about your power or your connections. I care that you burn for what you did." "Mrs. Hanley." Claire was suddenly beside me, supporting my weight. "We need to get you to a hospital." "Not yet." I turned to face the cameras, aware that somewhere, in living rooms and bars and late-night newsrooms, people were watching this unfold in real time. "My name is Margaret Hanley. 6 weeks ago, my son Samuel was murdered by LifeMen Therapeutics for trying to expose medical device deaths. Tonight, you heard the man responsible confess. You saw him attack me. This is what happens when corporations value profit over human life." My voice was hoarse, but I kept going. Had to. For Sam. 37 people are dead because LifeMen knew their cardiac stents were failing and hid the evidence. 37 families destroyed. My son tried to stop them and they killed him for it. They ran my daughter-in-law off the road. They bribed police. They thought money and power made them untouchable. I touched my throat where Kane's hands had been. They were wrong. The cameras kept rolling as they loaded Kane into the back of a patrol car. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small and scared and human in the worst possible way. Claire touched my shoulder gently. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid." "I learned from the best." I nodded toward the cruiser. "My son." They took me to the hospital, examined my throat, took photos of the bruises, gave me painkillers I didn't take. Emily was there when I arrived, having watched everything on her phone from her hospital bed. She held me while I finally let myself shake, let the terror and adrenaline drain out. "You did it," she whispered. "Maggie, you actually did it." "Not yet," I rasped. "This was just the opening act." Because here's what Kane didn't know, what none of them knew. I'd been planning 3 moves ahead from the moment I found that SD card. The evidence I'd given to Claire? That was the appetizer. The confrontation at the columbarium? Theater. The real blow was coming. Over the next 72 hours, Claire's story exploded. The video of Kane attacking me went viral. Millions of views. Every news network picked it up. Pharmaceutical executive assaults grieving mother. Corporate cover-up of medical deaths exposed. Florida grandmother takes down billion-dollar company. I became famous, not the kind of famous I'd ever wanted, but famous nonetheless. LifeMen's stock plummeted. The FDA launched an investigation. The FBI raided their headquarters, and more people came forward. Families of the dead, former employees with their own stories of corruption. It was working. Everything was working exactly as we'd planned. Then on the 4th day, my doorbell rang at midnight. I opened it to find a man I didn't recognize. 30-ish, hollow-eyed, shaking. "Mrs. Hanley?" His voice cracked. "My name is Jason Moore. I'm the one who started the fire that killed your son." My world tilted. "What?" "I need to confess." Tears streamed down his face. "I need you to know I'm sorry. I need you to know Kane lied to me. He told me." He broke down sobbing. "He told me your son killed my mother." I stood in my doorway, staring at the man who'd murdered Sam, and felt something inside me finally terribly understand. "Come inside," I said quietly. "Tell me everything." Jason Moore sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Kane had slid his blood money envelope, and told me how he'd been turned into a weapon. His mother, Linda Moore, had received a LifeMend cardiac stent in March. By May, she was dead. The doctors called it complications, natural causes. Jason knew better because he'd found the lawsuit papers she'd started filing before her heart gave out. "I was angry," he said, his voice hollow with exhaustion and guilt. "I wanted someone to pay." Then Kane contacted me, said he understood my pain, said there was a man at LifeMend, a researcher, who'd falsified the safety data that killed my mom. Said this man was about to destroy evidence and disappear. "He told you Sam was the villain," I said quietly. "He showed me fake emails, fake reports, made it look like your son had deliberately hidden the stent failures to protect his career." Jason's hand shook around the coffee cup I'd given him. "Kane said if we didn't act fast, this man would get away with murdering dozens of people, including my mother. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Kane had found a grieving son and aimed him like a gun at my own child. He gave me money," Jason continued, "told me which motel Sam would be at. Gave me accelerant and a key card, said it would look like an accident, said justice would be served." His voice cracked. I believed him. I wanted to believe him because I needed someone to blame for Mom's death. "So you went to the motel?" "I went to the motel." He met my eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I poured the accelerant. I lit the match. I heard him inside, heard him screaming, and I ran. I thought, God help me. I thought I was avenging my mother. I should have hated him, should have wanted him dead. But looking at this broken man across my table, I saw only another one of Kane's victims, another son who'd lost his mother, another person manipulated and destroyed by corporate greed." "When did you realize the truth?" I asked. 3 days ago, when your video went viral." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw Kane attack you, heard him talking about protecting the company. And I understood. I'd killed the one person who was trying to help people like my mom. I murdered the man who could have saved her." We sat in silence. The clock on my wall ticked. Outside, palm trees rustled in the night breeze. Somewhere in this quiet coastal town, families slept peacefully, unaware that in this kitchen, the final piece of a murder conspiracy was falling into place. "Jason," I said carefully, "will you testify?" Will you tell the authorities what Kane did? I'll tell everyone. His voice strengthened with desperate certainty. I'll tell the police, the FBI, the press. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison if that's what it takes. But I need people to know. I need your son's name cleared. He was a hero and I killed him because I was lied to. I reached across the table and took his shaking hands. Then let's make sure the truth gets told. I called Detective Santos. She arrived within the hour with a recorder and a witness form. Jason confessed everything while I sat beside him. This strange solidarity forming between two people, connected by grief and murder. This changes everything, Santos said grimly after Jason signed his statement. With his testimony, we can charge Kane with conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation. This isn't just corporate fraud anymore. This is capital murder charges. Good, I said simply. The trial began 6 weeks later. Clearwater's federal courthouse filled beyond capacity. News vans lined the streets. Reporters swarmed the steps. I walked through them wearing my best dress, navy blue, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, and held Emily's hand as cameras flashed like lightning. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. Kane sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive suit replaced by prison uniform. His lawyers, 3 of them, slick and sharp, whispered urgently in his ears. He looked at me once. Just once. I stared back and didn't blink until he looked away. The prosecution called me first. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt steadier than they had in months, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down and looked directly at the jury. 12 faces, some young, some old, all watching me with careful attention. Mrs. Hanley, the prosecutor began gently. Can you tell us about the phone call you received on the night of March 13th? So I did. Told them about Sam's trembling voice asking if I'd eaten. Told them about the police at my door at dawn, about Emily's crash, about Kane's blood money, about finding the SD card hidden in my husband's fountain pen. The prosecutor played the audio from the columbarium. The courtroom fell silent as Kane's voice filled the space. Your son made a mistake. He threatened to damage a company worth billions. I gave him a chance to walk away. He refused. I protected my company. Protected. Such a clean word for murder. Jason Moore testified next. Broke down on the stand describing how Kane had manipulated him. How he'd believed he was serving justice when he was really serving corporate profits. I killed an innocent man, Jason said, sobbing. I killed a hero because Richard Kane lied to me, because he needed someone else to do his dirty work. Then came the parade of experts, medical examiners, FBI financial analysts, former LifeMend employees who testified about the culture of concealment and intimidation, a paper trail of death and deceit that stretched back 3 years. Claire Rivera testified about the investigation, showed the jury the complete evidence from Sam's SD card, 37 patient files, 37 deaths, 37 families destroyed. The defense tried, argued that Kane had been misquoted, misunderstood, that he'd been speaking hypothetically at the columbarium, that Jason Moore was an unreliable witness with his own agenda. But they couldn't explain the offshore accounts, couldn't explain why Kane had attacked me on camera, couldn't explain the concealed patient deaths. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sat in the gallery with Emily on one side and the families of the dead on the other. We became a community of grief united by Kane's crimes. On the final day, the prosecutor gave his closing argument. Richard Kane had a choice, he said, pacing before the jury. When Samuel Hanley discovered that people were dying, Kane could have pulled the defective stents, could have warned patients, could have saved lives. Instead, he chose profit. He chose to silence the whistleblower. He chose to hire Jason Moore to commit murder. And when Margaret Hanley, a 67-year-old widow running a sandwich shop, came looking for justice, he chose to try to kill her too. He turned to face Kane directly. 37 people are dead because this man decided their lives were worth less than his quarterly earnings. Samuel Hanley is dead because he believed truth mattered more than money. How many more would have died if Margaret Hanley hadn't been brave enough to fight back? The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood, a woman about my age with steel gray hair and kind eyes, and read the verdict. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty. The word rang through the courtroom like a bell. On the count of solicitation of murder, guilty. On 37 counts of criminally negligent homicide, guilty. On charges of wire fraud, guilty. On charges of assault with intent to kill, guilty, 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 guilty. Kane's face drained of color. His lawyers moved to object, but the judge silenced them with a look. "Richard Kane," Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have been found guilty of crimes that shock the conscience. You weaponized grief. You murdered to protect profit. You betrayed every principle of corporate responsibility and human decency." She paused, letting the words settle. "I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment without possibility of parole on the murder conspiracy charges, an additional 20 years on the fraud charges, to be served consecutively." Kane crumpled, actually crumpled, his body folding in on itself as the reality hit. Life in prison, no parole, no escape. I closed my eyes and felt something inside me finally release. "Sam, I did it, sweetheart. I kept my promise." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward my face. I stood on the steps with Emily beside me and Claire behind us, and I spoke to the crowd. "Today, justice was served, but 37 people are still dead. My son is still gone. This verdict doesn't bring anyone back." My voice carried across the crowd, steady and clear. What it does is prove that no company, no matter how powerful, is above the law. That ordinary people, mothers and grandmothers and grieving families, can stand up to corruption and win. Someone in the crowd started clapping, then another, then everyone. The applause rolled over me like a wave, and I let myself cry for the first time since this whole nightmare began. We went to Sam's columbarium that evening, just Emily and me, brought flowers and soup, his favorite chicken noodle, and set the bowl before his name carved in marble. "You won, Sam," I whispered. "Your truth didn't burn. It couldn't burn, and now everyone knows what you died trying to tell them." Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat there as the sun set over clear water, painting the sky orange and pink and gold, and for the first time in months the world felt almost right. But the story wasn't over. 3 days later, a courier arrived at my door with a thick envelope. Inside, documents from LifeMen's bankruptcy proceedings. The company was being liquidated, assets seized, and there was a victims' compensation fund being established. Attached was a handwritten note from one of Sam's former colleagues, Paul Davies, the man who'd been too afraid to speak up before. "Mrs. Hanley, I'm sorry I didn't have your son's courage. I'm trying to do better now. There are others like Sam at other companies, other whistleblowers who need help. Would you be willing to talk?" I held that note and looked at Emily. "What do you think?" She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her since before the accident. "I think Sam would want us to keep fighting." "Then that's what we'll do." 6 months after the verdict, I stood in front of my deli with a paintbrush in one hand and Emily steadying the ladder beneath me. The old sign, Maggie's Deli, faded and familiar, came down. In its place, I hung something new. The Honest Spoon. The letters gleamed in the morning sun, navy blue against cream background. Simple, true, a promise to everyone who walked through that door. "It's perfect," Emily said, stepping back to admire our work. She looked healthier now, color back in her cheeks, light returning to her eyes. She'd left the pharmacy and joined a nonprofit called Medical Justice Alliance, helping other families navigate the nightmare of corporate medical fraud. "Sam would like it," I said softly. "He would love it." I climbed down and we stood together on the sidewalk, looking at this small piece of transformation. Everything had changed. The deli me. The world itself felt different now. Inside, the smell of fresh bread filled the air. I'd been baking since 4 a.m. Sourdough, rye, challah. more than I could possibly sell. But that was the point. At 11 o'clock, I unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open. Within minutes, the first customer arrived. Mrs. Chen from down the street, elderly and bent with arthritis. "Margaret," she said, shuffling to the counter, "I heard about your new policy." "Is it true?" "It's true," I confirmed. "If you're hungry and you can't pay, you eat anyway. No questions asked." Her eyes filled with tears. "My Social Security doesn't stretch like it used to." "Then you eat here." I handed her a bowl of chicken soup, the same recipe I'd made for Sam since he was 5 years old. "This one's on the house. Every Wednesday you come in, I'll have soup waiting." She took the bowl with shaking hands and found a table by the window. Ate slowly, savoring each spoonful. When she left, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you," so quietly I almost didn't hear it. That became the rhythm of my days. Cooking for people. Feeding them. Not for profit. I'd received enough from the Victims' Compensation Fund to live comfortably, but for something more important. For connection. For proof that kindness could exist in a world that had shown me so much cruelty. The other families started coming too. Parents who'd lost children to LifeMen stents, spouses who'd buried their partners. We'd formed a support group during the trial, and now we met every Tuesday evening in the deli's back room. We shared our stories, our grief, our small victories over the crushing weight of loss. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, we began to heal. Jason Moore came too. He'd taken a plea deal, testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. 10 years instead of life. He was serving time at Coleman Federal Prison, but he wrote me letters, apologizing, explaining, asking forgiveness I wasn't sure I could give. Emily thought I should write back. "He was a victim too," she'd say. "Cain weaponized his grief just like he tried to weaponize yours." She was right, but forgiving the man who'd murdered my son, even knowing he'd been manipulated, that was harder than facing down Cain in that columbarium. I'm still working on it. Paul Davies kept his word. He connected me with other whistleblowers, people working at pharmaceutical companies and medical device manufacturers who'd found evidence of wrongdoing but were too afraid to come forward. I talked to them, told them Sam's story, told them that truth, no matter how dangerous, was worth fighting for. 3 of them went public. 2 more investigations launched. The ripples kept spreading outward. Claire Rivera won a Peabody Award for her coverage of the LifeMen scandal. She came to the deli to show me the trophy, this beautiful recognition of her work. "This belongs to you too," she said, setting it on the counter. "None of this happens without your courage." "It was Sam's courage," I corrected. "I just finished what he started." "No." She looked at me with fierce certainty. "He found the truth." "You made the world believe it. Those are different kinds of courage, Maggie. Both matter." On the 1-year anniversary of Sam's death, Emily and I made the drive to Clearwater Memorial Gardens, brought flowers, white roses this time, his favorite, and food, so much food, sandwiches and soup and fresh bread. We set up a table near the columbarium and invited everyone, the support group families, Claire and her crew, Detective Santos, Ethan Cole from the print shop, even Paul Davies, who'd driven down from Atlanta where he was working with the Medical Justice Alliance. We ate together in that place of death and turned it into something else, something living, a celebration of truth and memory and the stubborn refusal to let corporate evil win. I stood before Sam's name carved in marble and set the bowl of soup at its base, just like I'd done every week since he'd died. "Sam, dinner's ready," I said softly, the words that had become ritual and prayer and promise all at once. And in my heart, maybe it was wishful thinking, maybe it was something more, I heard his voice, that question he'd asked me every night when he worked late, the last words he'd ever spoken to me. "Mom, did you eat?" "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered back, tears streaming down my face. Mom ate. Emily's arm wrapped around my shoulders. We stood there as the Florida sun poured golden light through the live oaks, as our friends and fellow survivors gathered around us, as the world kept spinning forward into whatever came next. The bruises on my throat had faded months ago. Cain was locked away in a cell that would be his home until he died. LifeMend was bankrupt and dissolved. The victims' families had received compensation and, more importantly, acknowledgement of their loss. Justice had been served, but Sam was still gone. That hole in my heart would never fully heal. There would always be moments, hearing his favorite song on the radio, seeing a father and son laughing together, baking his chicken soup, when the grief hit fresh and sharp and absolutely devastating. That's what loss is. It doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it better. I reopened the deli the next day, made my bread, served my soup, fed people who couldn't pay, and charged fair prices to those who could. The honest spoon, stirring the pot, nourishing the community one meal at a time. A young woman came in around 2 o'clock, nervous, fidgeting with her phone. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Are you Margaret Hanley?" Her voice shook slightly. "The one who exposed LifeMend?" "I am." She took a deep breath. "I work for MedTech Solutions. I found something. Patient data that doesn't match what they're reporting to the FDA. I think people might be dying and I don't know what to do and I'm so scared, but I can't. I can't just stay quiet and let it happen." I came around the counter, took her hands. They were cold despite the Florida heat. "What's your name, honey?" "Sarah. Sarah Pham." "Okay, Sarah. First thing, you did the right thing by coming here. Second thing, you're not alone. We're going to help you. I'm going to introduce you to some people. A lawyer, a journalist, others who've been where you are." Relief flooded her face. "Really? Really?" I squeezed her hands. "Truth doesn't burn, Sarah. It can't. No matter how much power they have, no matter how much money they spend trying to hide it, the truth always finds a way." I made her soup, made her sit and eat while I called Emily and Claire. Within the hour, we had a plan forming. Another investigation. Another chance to stop death hiding behind corporate profit. That evening, after everyone had left and the deli was clean and quiet, I stood at the counter and looked around. At the new sign hanging in the window. At the tables where families had laughed and cried and healed together. At the kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals for people who needed feeding. This wasn't the life I'd imagined. I'd thought my story was over. Thought I'd run this small deli until my body gave out, then fade quietly into whatever comes next. Instead, I'd become something else. A fighter, an advocate, a woman who looked at corporate evil and refused to blink. Sam had given me that. His courage, his integrity, his absolute conviction that truth mattered more than comfort or safety or staying quiet. Truth doesn't burn. Those words, his words preserved on that SD card, had become my mantra. The thing I told every frightened whistleblower. The thing I whispered to myself on hard days when the grief felt too heavy to carry. I locked up the deli and walked home through Clearwater's quiet streets. The Gulf breeze carried the smell of salt and night-blooming jasmine. Palm trees rustled overhead. Somewhere, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary town. But I wasn't ordinary anymore. None of us were. We were the people who'd stared down corruption and won. The survivors who'd turned our grief into something purposeful. The community that refused to let death have the final word. At home, I made myself tea, sat on my porch watching the stars emerge, and I thought about tomorrow, about Sarah Pham and whatever corporate crime she'd uncovered, about the work ahead, about how one ordinary woman with a deli and a dead son had somehow become a voice for justice. The world was still unjust, still flawed, still full of people like Richard Kane who'd trade lives for profit without a second thought. But it also had people like Sam, like Emily, like Claire and Sarah and all the others brave enough to speak truth to power. And it had me, a 67-year-old grandmother who'd learned that you're never too old to fight back, never too small to matter, never too powerless to change the world. I raised my teacup to the stars, to wherever Sam was now. "I'm still here, sweetheart," I whispered, "still fighting, still telling your story. And I promise, your truth will keep burning bright long after I'm gone." The night wrapped around me like a blanket, warm, peaceful, full of possibility, and somewhere in that darkness, I swear I heard him answer. "Good job, Mom. I'm proud of you." I smiled through my tears and went inside to rest, Tomorrow would bring new battles, new truths to uncover, new people to feed and help and love. But tonight? Tonight, I could finally sleep, because truth doesn't burn, and love, real love, the kind that survives death and grief and corporate murder conspiracies. Love outlives everything, even vengeance, especially vengeance.